enough. But
welcome to Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today, once again, it must be Tuesday because I'm joined by Lawrence Connolly. How you doing, Lawrence?
Doing well. Missing Celtic. You know,
how do you find these international breaks? I know you're not a massive fan of international football, Lawrence. Is it really just you're watching the Celtic players, you're watching the injury updates, you're watching the illness updates? Is that how do you get through a couple of weeks without watching Celtic?
You know, it's hard going. You know, what have you got to look forward to? French Eddie bagging a couple, breaking records.
Good to see. Yeah.
Hopefully that gives him a bit of confidence. It shows that he's back on the goal trail. Hopefully it translates over to, you know, if he starts away against Hibs, hopefully that does well. COVID situation, you know, what's happening with Aaron Moy, the word is that, you know, I think they will play, even though it'll break Norwegian health rules, but so hopefully they're okay. Scotland qualified, but, you know, I didn't see the game. I saw the extra time because the wee one wanted to go out, so I had to take her out. McGregor, you know, decent game. Christie scores a goal. Griff,
yes,
off the bench, bravely takes the first penalty.
It was brave, absolutely.
You know,
because this is a chat I had with Stevie Mullen, actually. You know, there's certain players who love to take the last one because they want the glory. You know what I mean? And it's a big ego thing. They want to have the glory. They want to be the guy running away to their teammates and all this. Griff went up there and done what he was there to do. And he was clinical.
Yep.
And, you know, in the second game, just the other night there, you know, when he had that one-on-one, that last-minute chance, he didn't do much wrong with that. It was a cracking save, to be fair.
It was decent. Boy gets the fingertips to its strong hand, isn't it? And it's, you know, Griff's done well there. You know, hopefully, you know, I don't know what the Griff fitness issue is. Well, November, and we keep getting told he's not fit to start.
Well,
he always gives his goals. He's got impact. He's decent with his corners and his free kicks. You know, he gives the team impetus, doesn't he?
The big thing for me is that there is talk of a culture change at Celtic Park. Now, the culture first time round had to be changed when Neil Lennon left. Ronnie Deila comes in and basically says the team's not fit enough. So where are we now? Are we at a stage where we're trying to change the culture that was implemented initially by Neil Lennon? Because when Lenny's big pal Sutty is giving Griffiths a hard time, and I think he went over the top on that, by the way, Lawrence, in relation to look at the state of his fitness. He's overweight and all this kind of stuff. And apparently they've had words. They've had a telephone conversation about it. I thought that was completely OTT, as was the treatment of Moy over the mobile phone. It's got to be said. But the question that I would ask, the simple question I would ask at this moment in time, when we're 9 points behind Rangers and they've got a far superior goal difference, yes, I know they've played a couple of games extra, is if you play Lee Griffiths, will he get us goals? And the answer to that question, quite simply, is yes. Now, when we're looking at the domestic game, we've got a new striker that we're trying to bed in Ayeti. We've got Edouard, who has been off the boil this season. And what I'm asking today is, can the international break prove to be a pivotal turning point in Celtic season? Because I think there's some signs that it could be when you look at the performances of Duffy, McGregor, Christie and Edouard. But Edouard's not been on it this season. Ayeti's still bedding in, and he's had some good games and some bad. He's had his injuries. Klimala, for me, is the fourth choice striker. But one player that you could certainly rely on to give you a goal, Lawrence, is Lee Griffiths.
Well, you know, he had a season as a lone striker before, didn't he? And it was it 40 goals, 40-something goals?
40 goals on the nose, yep.
Yep, yeah. Shows you can do it, doesn't it, as a lone striker? Whether, you know, we should be playing a lone striker or two strikers, a different argument. Do we need two sitting midfielders in Scotland? You know,
that's a big question.
You know, we're losing a lot of goals, would suggest that defensively we're not sound, but it's something we definitely need to sort out. Yeah, but could we sacrifice one of the defensive midfielders and get another, you know, get Lee Griffiths on with either Ayeti or Edouard?
When you're playing in Scotland, and again, people think, you know, you're out of touch, Paul, because, you know, no one plays 4-4-2 and all this kind of stuff. And there is a kind of a viewpoint whereby you never play two up front. No one plays two up front and all this kind of stuff. But when you look at the partnership that was developing between Edouard and Griffiths, right up until the St Mirren game, that was the last game we were allowed to actually attend. And you think back to that, Lawrence, you think, right, we need to really start firing on all cylinders second half of the season. And I say it's the second half, it's not quite. But you can use the international break almost like a halfway point, and obviously things need to change in the second half. Is that a development that you would like to see? Is that something we can do against Hibs at Easter Road?
Yeah, I think so. Get two strikers on the park, and the formation changes during the game. If you start 4-4-2 or start 4, you've got 4-1-3-2, whatever it is, it's going to change during the game depending whether you've got the ball, don't have the ball, where the ball is in the park. So, Lee Griffiths, as you touched on, he's on the park, he gets goals. He seems to drive the team on, he gives them an energy. He's not doing that from the bench, is he? When he's on the park, he's got an impact on the game, and we need players that have impacts in the game. Certainly positive impacts like Lee does.
The thing, you might look at the season, and Lee's not played a massive part in it. He's come off the bench and scored on 3 occasions off the top of my head, important goals for Celtic. The one game that I think was disappointing for him was the first half against AC Milan, where he started the game, Lawrence. And you might look at that and say, well, he let us down. I don't think that his appearance coincided with the best part of the game for Celtic, which was actually in the second half for a spell.
Yeah, well, AC Milan, it's also the standard opposition you're playing against there, isn't it? We don't play AC Milan every week. We don't play against that quality defender, so they'll have had an impact on what Lee was doing on that pitch.
When he was going away to play the international games, Lawrence, and we think Lee Griffiths, having not played for Scotland for 2 years, which shows you the extent of the issues that Lee has faced, both on a fitness level and a mental wellness level as well over that period. It's astonishing, because he's now 30 years of age, and that 2 years is crucial to any player's career. But I honestly think that Lee Griffiths has a massive part to play for Celtic in this second half, as I'm calling it, of the season. When you look at Edouard, and I know he's 22, playing for the under-21s, breaking records, the goal-scoring record he's had with France under-21s has been astonishing. But you were looking at him last night, going into that game, you're thinking to yourself, well, he's not had a great season for Celtic so far. He's not even hit third gear, never mind top gear. Yet, this is maybe what clicks. It might be that familiarity around the French setup, which he's so comfortable playing in. Playing alongside that quality player, he's getting in amongst the goals, which obviously breeds confidence in any striker, Lawrence. You're looking at Shane Duffy at the back. I was talking yesterday to Kevin Graham about his performances for the Republic of Ireland, criticised by Roy Keane for the game against England. It was a meaningless friendly by all accounts. And then the second game against Wales, he's played particularly well. Ireland's best player, according to Kevin. So you're looking at, maybe there's a turning point there. I hope there's a turning point there, because, the chances are we're going to need a Shane Duffy in the second half of the season. In any case, regardless if we're playing 2 central defenders or 3, you're then looking at Christie. I don't think Christie's a bad season anyway. I'm singing his praises time and time again, but bringing Griffiths back in as a starter for Celtic, not just as your 20-minute impact sub, which obviously he's pretty good at, I think takes a wee bit of the onus off Christie when it comes to free kicks and corners, because a lot of people focus on the poor delivery from free kicks and corners from Christie, and I think that takes away from his overall game.
The reason he's taking them is probably the best guy in the park to take them. If his delivery's poor, the other people that aren't taking them are worse. Griffiths is definitely better on his delivery and better with his free kicks. Yeah, it will take a bit of pressure off Christie. It will also take pressure off Eddie as well, I'd imagine, if that's the partnership.
Yeah. He certainly did last season, didn't
he? Yeah. He made space, because it's 2 really dangerous players they've got to worry about, isn't it? And they seem to be linking up well. Whether we go with the 2, we'll wait and see, but I'd like to see it.
Before we go into the comments and some of the other points we want to cover today, Lawrence, and there's loads of comments coming through, so thank you everybody for joining us on Facebook, Twitter, and also on YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, and I keep saying this, make sure that you do subscribe to the channel. The channel is 100% free. Everything we do is free. We broadcast daily, numerous times daily. On a match day, sometimes 5 times. We recorded 5 broadcasts yesterday, Lawrence. Not all Celtic related, but most of our content certainly is. There's different channels you can choose from, different playlists. So thanks for making those comments, and continue to do so, because we'll work through them as soon as we possibly can. But if you look ahead to the game at the weekend against Hibs Lawrence, Easter Road. We actually had a Hibs legend in earlier on today on one of the other shows. You've seen him on your way in, Mickey Weir. And you'll remember Mickey Weir from the 80s and 90s as a tricky winger. Always seemed to cause problems. He was always potentially going to cause you problems. A lovely guy, Mickey. And I thought this season that Hibs really would be pushing Rangers. I actually did, for second place. I certainly thought they would be the third club. They would certainly be taking that mantle from the likes of Aberdeen and Motherwell, who we've seen finishing third over the piece. And I thought Hibs would be up there. They started off well. They bought well. Mainly domestic based players, but they did buy well. And I rate Jack Ross and John Potter as a managerial team. They've gone off the boil a wee bit. They need a result. Lenny certainly needs a result. But Easter Road's not been a happy hunting ground for some time for Celtic, certainly in the league. How do you see this one going?
I think it's going to be tight. I mean, Hibs just beat Dundee, didn't they, in the League Cup?
Yeah, 4-1.
Yeah, so that's going to give them a bit of confidence getting into playing us. You know, I think we've been stuttering towards the break.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the win ratio is still phenomenal that we've got, but it's just the football's not been the free flowing that we'd expect.
And it's coincided with some poor European results as well, isn't it?
Yep. At the back, we've been weak. You know, you're looking at young boy Nisbet, certainly knows where the goal is, doesn't he? It looks like a quick player.
Strong. Yeah. Strong player.
Who are we going to fit? You know, in goals, I'd like to see Barkas. You know, it's £5 million keeper. We need to see what he's like as a keeper. I don't think he's had enough run to show us. I think we'll stick with 4 at the back. I think Lenny's going to stick with that. Obviously, Diego at left back. I think he'll keep with Frimpong at right back, and that gives you, the 2 centre halves positions up for grabs. Hopefully,
well, Frimpong, he'll be out with that injury, will he not? Where he was scathed against Motherwell.
I don't know how long it's going to keep him out for. It's bruising, isn't it?
And maybe actually he could be doing with a rest because he's played a lot of games and he takes a lot of fouls. Probably the most fouled player in the Celtic squad. Again, he's the type of player I'm pretty sure he wouldn't thank you for a rest. But yesterday, for example, we were talking about maybe reverting to more defensive-minded fullbacks and pushing Laxalt further up.
I think you've got a casualty if you push Diego further up. And I like Taylor, but I think Laxalt's head and shoulders above him as a left back or a left wing back. So I think you'd lose further forward. Moyes just hit the goal trail, so it's Moy that you're then talking about sacrificing.
So Moy's going to definitely be available. Him and Ayer, that was in news this morning, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's a boost.
They should be available. That's the headline I've seen. I don't know if the Scottish Football Joint Response Group has definitely confirmed that. We'll wait and see. There's been some strange decisions.
We need to make sure that players are not going to be jailed, because we were talking about jail time earlier on this week, weren't they, in Norway? It's about, they get released from Norway to come here and self-isolate if they follow the Norway region rules, and now they're not following them. But I think there's other clubs going to be fighting that are affected, that have got Norwegian internationalists that may have more sway than Celtic on it. See, this is a big thing, Lawrence. In the past, you've made your feelings known, and they're your own personal feelings in relation to international football. You've been criticised for it. I've been criticised for it as well, even though I'm delighted Scotland qualified, absolutely delighted that they qualified. However, I think this international break and the last one's brought more problems than anything. And although you're delighted that Scotland have qualified, that's tempered by the fact that, we've lost players to illness. It's been an absolute shambolic set of circumstances created from authorities out with Celtic Park. So
Norway are scrambling together players that wouldn't be in the first team just now to complete a fixture. Mm-hmm. So what value does that give the fixture? If you know what I mean, they've got, right, you can't play your first team because of COVID, just throw anyone in. It should international, especially friendlies or international football, been going ahead when you're forcing players to mix out.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
For me, I'd rather it been cancelled. But I think we're quite glad of this break in terms of a bit of time to regroup. It's going to come test will be against Hibs, see if we can carry on. Against Motherwell, we gave away a lot of chances. It's still a good win, but we gave away a lot of chances. We know that we need to tighten up at the back. Can we get a settled defence, I suppose? But we're sitting a settled defence that starts playing well. Defence as in the keeper, the 4 defenders, it looks like going to be in a defensive midfielder, midfielders in front of them.
That's the 3 key areas. If we can manage to assemble the correct personnel, because they're there, the players are there, Lawrence.
Yep.
And I know that we've suffered pretty badly this season through injury, and also we continue to suffer through injury and illness. Neil Lennon said before the international break, Julien will be back after the international break. There's no way after a serious back injury that you're going to throw somebody right into a game like this game against Hibs. I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, Lenny's saying he's going to be back. Is he going to start on the bench? Who's your centre half's going to be? Ayer if he's fit, clear to play.
Ayer and Beaton obviously they've married up. Duffy was rested, dropped. Lenny didn't want to call it dropped because obviously a big part of the issue with Duffy at the moment is this confidence, this lack of confidence. He seems bereft of confidence to the point where he's not doing the simple things that a defender needs to do as part of his fundamental task and role as a centre half. He's not doing it. And this is the point I was trying to make. He goes out there, let's say he plays well against England, plays well against Wales, and he comes back fully confident. He's got a 3rd game to play. Tomorrow night, I think they're playing. So he gets, and then by the way, the Republic of Ireland team are hardly firing on all cylinders. I think it's like 7 games without a win under Stephen Kenny. So he's had a good game. He comes back fully confident. Do you put him back in? I think the time comes where we say, Barkas, you're our number 1. Shane Duffy, you're the centre half, and then you sort out the 2 deep lying midfielders. That's an issue for Celtic also. Are we utilising Callum McGregor well enough? Is Scott Brown's performances actually suffering from playing there also? So these are 3 key areas that we need to get right on the weekend against Hibs, because they're no mugs, and I know the last couple of games in the league they've not been great, but you're looking at the other fixtures, because we've got to do it now. We're looking at other fixtures. You're looking at Rangers playing Aberdeen. Yesterday, I got a few comments saying, Rangers will trounce Aberdeen. You never know. Because that's one of the games that you would expect over a season, Aberdeen to take something from Rangers.
Yeah, Aberdeen's a decent team. They're going to be one of the nearest. They're going to be top 6, aren't they? Maybe maybe the 3rd force again. So, it's someone that's capable of taking points. Whether or not they will is going to be a different matter. But yeah, you could see, it wouldn't be a complete shock if Aberdeen took, shared the points or even get a win. It wouldn't be a complete shock. I think we kind of need to focus on getting the 3 points and getting as you say, that kind of diamond between the keeper, the centre halves, and the defensive mids really sorted out.
Yeah,
to working right, because it's not been working right all season as far as I can see. Patches went, that's starting to look good. They know where they should be. They're performing as a unit, but not often enough and not consistently enough. Which, the firepower we've got, we're generally going to have the firepower to win games.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you don't play well, if you leak a goal at the back or leak 2, you're dropping either 3 or 2 points. You're
looking at and I've said this before, any team, and certainly domestically, Lawrence, looking at a side where you've got Frimpong coming down the right, Laxalt down the left, you've then got that bank of Christie, Elyounoussi and Rogic, and then up front, take your pick, Edouard, Ajeti, Griffiths. That's going to be any team in Scotland on its day, as a forward line. But behind that's where the issue has been. Yeah. So you've got another 5 players to sort out there. The fact that we don't seem to know what the best combination is a bit of a concern, and it's time, obviously, to get that sorted. And it needs to get sorted this weekend.
A lot of it has been enforced by injury and COVID and stuff. Part of that's going to have had an effect of who we can play. Good mention to young Welsh. He came in, I don't think he let us down, and obviously started as, we don't have a reserve team, but, he was listed as a reserve team, not as part of the first team squad. He's come in and done well, I was impressed with him. Yeah, we need to get settled. But we're looking to go over these injuries. I don't think there's been a team in world football that's had as many COVID-related incidents as ourselves so far. Players denied to them. We've had a lot of injuries in that part of the park as well. So hopefully we've had our shares. If these things even themselves out over the season, hopefully we're kind of putting in.
Just like the refereeing decisions.
I will.
That's another subject entirely.
We'll look at Frimpong. There's been at least 2 red card tackles on him this season that haven't resulted in red cards or reviews by the compliance officer, and you're kind of going, well, wait a minute here. But then again, there's another compliance officer on our way. So that's the third one. Resolution 12 still isn't dealt with. It's still parked with the SFA, who have said they don't have jurisdiction over it. It needs to be the court arbitration in Sweden. And I think the Resolution 12 is now Resolution 11, going back in front of the Celtic AGM.
December the 14th, is it?
Yep, December 14th online. I believe the Celtic board's recommended to vote against it. The kind of bigger thing is, do the SFA seriously not have jurisdiction over a member club? Is that the only member club that they don't have jurisdiction over? Is it only on this particular issue? You know, I think it's, you know, there's obviously a different set of rules for that club compared to every other club by the looks of it. That can't be right.
The thing that concerns me, I mean, there's obviously a group of very dedicated people, Lawrence, who are keeping this thing burning, keeping this thing alive, and all credit to them, incidentally, because so many times you've heard over the years of fights that, you know, they end up just dying out, Lawrence, you know, because it does take a lot of time, effort and money, because there's been a lot of money that's been required through the legal channels to keep this thing alive. And these are simply Celtic people with Celtic's best interests at heart, and that can't be overlooked. You know, it's not about one-upmanship, it's about doing the right thing. You know, it's not as though they're on this crusade and it's a mad, paranoid crusade and they're in the wrong. What the Res 12 guys, maybe they'll be renamed Res 11 guys, have done, you know, is the right thing. And they're actually doing it on behalf of the wider fan base, shareholders, other member clubs.
You know, it came out in open court through the think Craig White trial that, there was definitely an overdue payable, and the Rangers knew about that. So we've got now who was on the licensing committee, Campbell Ogilvie, Andrew Dixon, and then Rob Petrie, who's the head of the SFA, somehow managed to still grant a European licence to Rangers, which would appear on it against the rules for getting a European licence. So if they were making those kinds of decisions then, were they looking the other way? Did they genuinely get blindsided by Rangers? You know, the tax case was out there. It was a bit an open secret, wasn't it? What decisions are they going to be called to make on in the future, and how can we rely on any kind of impartiality from them?
There's just a huge sense amongst a great number of people, Lawrence, that there's too many people in power wanting this just to go away, and the people in power with that influence will do whatever they can to make it go away, because they don't want, you know, the nuts and bolts of it to become public knowledge, because obviously if it does, then a very many people of power will have to come down with it. So they'll do everything in their power to ensure that it goes away.
I mean, the last thing that this was when Fergus pushed the Guidetti thing, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. And that took the president of SFA, I think, 2 SFA internal inquiries cleared of any wrongdoing. But then when it went to open court, the SFA couldn't provide any evidence at all to back up their series of events. And you're going, well, wait a minute. In your own inquiries, you can pass yourself, but you get to open court and you can't provide any evidence. The difference,
I'm glad you brought it up. We're not going to labour this, Lawrence, because I know, you know, that it is covered in so much depth and with so much expertise with other people, and we all know who they are, and they're doing great to keep this alive. The big difference there was we had Fergus McCann, right? Whereas this is a group of fans. So we don't have that spearhead who is of influence and who is of the club. And that's the biggest frustration, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the club that's not carrying it forward. And when you read their statements on it, you're thinking, well, why is it not the best interest at Celtic to get what Celtic's legitimately due? Why is it not in the best interest of Celtic if impartial decisions that have, you know, adversely affected the club?
They've affected the fans. They've affected the club.
Aren't called into question. You can't go back and change that, you know, and play that European season again. But you could at least call it out and make sure that checks and balances are put in place, that it doesn't happen in the future.
Well, that's what, you know, for me though, when a club is saying it's not in the best interest, there's not an appetite for the highest echelons to entertain this in any way, shape or form, and that's clear. That's disappointing to the wider fan base, but also this core group who have kept the fight alive. And we'll discuss it with updates as the updates happen, Lawrence, without a doubt. What I don't want is for people to say, oh, they're going to lose the league this season, so they're going to focus on something completely different. It's not about that. This is relevant, and obviously as it progresses, we'll discuss it as a point on the ACSOM Bulletin. Of course we will.
It's been running for a number of years now, hasn't it? It's not like it's just a talking point. It's been going on forever. I mean, it's the third compliance officer that's now said, job's not for me.
No.
And is that because these are, serious legal professionals that have maybe looked at it and thought, I'm losing any kind of professional credibility I've got?
I'm not putting my name to that. Yeah.
Is that why they're walking out on it? There's talk that they might now change the job. I've seen the English compliance officer saying, what you need is an ex-police officer to do that job.
Do you know any?
I know a few. But talking about leagues, so Celtic have pulled out the Atlantic League. They've told the Atlantic League that, no thanks, we're not interested. And it looks that Desmond's either interested in the status quo or a British league.
He's maybe looking at the situation prior to COVID against the situation coming out of this. And, I do remember a previous interview we did with a financial advisor stroke expert who said all bets are off. So everything you believed to be true before COVID is going to be a different set of rules after it, because, there was no way Celtic could play in the English League, for example, beforehand, because, there's stipulations and regulations that would prevent that. After COVID, once they look at the whole landscape of the game, north and south of the border, who knows what might be the case. I find it interesting when you came in and you were speaking about that this morning, because I was on another broadcast this morning, Lawrence, so I haven't had my usual time to digest some of the news and do some research on it. But I've always liked the idea of it, or, I think it was called, was it the G9, where there was 9 countries back in the time of Alan MacDonald, and 9 countries who wanted to play a league. And it was a great idea because there was relegation and promotion. So, for example, if Celtic finished bottom of the league and got relegated, they got relegated back into the Scottish League, and it allowed another Scottish team to go into the Transatlantic League.
Well, there was back in the 1890s, 1900s, I don't know, what would you call that first decade of a century. But Celtic were in talks about a European League then, and the only thing that scuppered it was the travel times that were going to be taken. So it's something Celtic have always had an eye on. But I think if Celtic have said no thanks to the Atlantic League, they're not cutting off that avenue without knowing that the possibility of something of a British league.
Something else.
And politically, could you see the UK government actually, would a British league suit them as a kind of counterbalance to Scottish independence? Would they say, well, look, maybe this is what we need to tie it together? Would that be, for a unionist government, would that be something that
it becomes a political decision?
Yeah. So
you're not allowed to mix politics with football, Lawrence. Remember that.
Well, Michael Davitt used to, but...
Oh, yeah. Stephen Forbes, welcome back, Stephen. It's always a pleasure to get your comments on YouTube. Following the This Is Our Story Inside Hearts BBC documentary, a similar inside look at Celtic this season would have been fascinating, especially in recent weeks. Now, Stephen, if you think about it, the Celtic media team probably are, at this moment in time, filming something for 10 in a row. I don't think it was going to be a fly-on-the-wall documentary, but by God, that would have been box office viewing, would it no, Lawrence?
It'd be amazing to actually know what's going on, because we're guessing injuries and COVID and why certain players aren't playing, and it's not like Barfield, you could go and watch the training, and Lennox Town you have to stand up in the hill and look through the fence and you catch a glimpse. It's to get
a bit windy up there.
Aye, to get kind of the inside story on it, it'd be great. Other cliques in the team, there seems to be suggested. I was reading something last night. There was one sitting at different tables. How many can fit at a one table? Could it simply be that? You don't know, but it'd be good to get kind of under the skin of it, wouldn't it? Get a fuller understanding.
Cliques exist in every workplace, and football's no different. And there's been, down the ages, players who don't get on. Players in some of the most successful teams, club sides in the world don't get on. And I think what we're doing there is we're looking for any reason as to why the performances are not right on the pitch. And we do overanalyse things once, we're trying to figure out why we're not as good as we were in the second half of last season. But in talking to documentaries, I did watch the first episode. I didn't watch last night's one, so I might look back on that. But I thought, to be honest with you, it was overhyped when I watched it. I've got to say, I did watch the first episode, thought it was overhyped. I look back on some of the football documentaries of the past. It's now in vogue to make a football documentary. It never used to be like that. But some of the ones of the past are fantastic. And I would implore anyone to go on YouTube and watch Orient for a Fiver. It's a Leighton Orient documentary based in the kind of early to mid-90s. And it really needs to be watched at least once by everybody. It's a cracker. You're not going to get a documentary like that on a club like Celtic, put it that way.
PLC, would they allow it? Too much at stake. But talk about Cliques. Remember the team that stopped at 10? Apparently that was they had Cliques until the training ground incident with Tosh and Henrik.
Absolutely.
And that seemed to bond the team together.
It was a clearing of the decks. It seems unusual, but having spoken to quite a few of the players in that squad, there was a divide, and they all admit it. And the Scottish players were in a clique, if you like, and the overseas players were in a clique. So you had Scandinavian players, didn't you? Quite a few of them. And they were all clubbing together. And then at Barfield, it basically was what they called the stiffs against the first team. So Tosh McKinley wasn't getting a game. He's playing for the stiffs in this bounce game. Something happens, as it always does in a football park, where two guys come together. He turns around and sticks the head in Henrik Larsson, who's obviously part of the Scandinavian clique. Don't know if he broke his nose. He certainly burst his nose.
Yeah.
Larsson had to fly back to Sweden because there had been a family bereavement. And everybody thought, that was him. Larsson's gone. And at that point, he wasn't the Larsson that he became. He wasn't quite the iconic Larsson that we now know and love. But what happened was we actually went out, because we were preparing for a Rangers game, as it happens. We went out and got beat from Rangers 1-0. It was the Richard Gough game where he's given it all that. But the players do say that after that, I think Tommy Johnson was the guy that used to organise bonding sessions, and they would go out and all this kind of stuff. So sometimes something happens and it clears the decks. There's been a couple of false dawns this season, Lawrence, and this is why I'm saying, the international break, a couple of players coming back to form, and Robert Arbuckle on YouTube makes that point. I hope French Eddie comes back refreshed, full of confidence and ready to bang in the goal. So do I. I mean, if he comes back, that could be the spark. But as I say, we need to sort out the goalkeeper, the centre-half situation, and that deep-lying midfield situation, which I think has been key to this team's decline this season.
We've got 6 new players in that were more or less all first teamers, weren't they? So it could be that it's just getting to know each other, and hopefully it's sorted out. These things take time. There's been players in the past taking a bit of time to settle, but it's definitely something we need to sort out, centre-half and the deep-lying midfielder. Do we need to play 2? Can we just play one and say just patrol in front of those 2, don't push on at all? When needed, drop back and be the third man. It's because I think Kilmax is wasted. I'd rather see him playing further forward, but it's something for Lenny to sort out, and hopefully, I think he will.
You think he will sort it out?
I think Lenny's got it in him to sort it out.
Barkas has to be the number one.
For me, I think we've got to play him, and we need to find out whether we've got to keep a goalkeeper there or not. He's not had any howlers for us. Flip side, he's not had any huge saves for us. But he's looked great with the ball at his feet. He moves the ball quickly, gets us off an attack quickly. We've paid $5 million for him. If we get to January, and we need to know, because if he's not a keeper, you're going to need to back up to Scott Bain, aren't you? It's going to be him or Hazard then, isn't it? I was saying that Barkas, so little games, £5 million. He's not first choice. It's Bain who's third choice last year.
Yeah.
For me, then you'd be going around going, well, we need to get somebody better than Scott Bain.
You just can't write off a £4.5 to £5 million goalkeeper, Lawrence. The investment in the squad has been massive. If you count the wages, even with the loan players and the loan fees on top of that as well. One of the other guys that isn't getting as many mentions at the moment is David Turnbull. Now, obviously, we brought him in as one of the most promising youth players, or young players rather, in Scottish football. He's barely played.
Yep.
Now, is he being bought in? Because I looked at the 6 players that were brought in, and I actually said at the time, I praised Celtic, the board, Lenny, that they had approached it differently this time. There was no projects. You know, you look back at January with Klimala and Sorrow, we've still hardly seen Sorrow. Klimala's obviously third, fourth choice striker. They were brought in as projects, Lawrence. It's a hit or a miss. You might get 1 in 4, 1 in 5 that actually come through and make an impact. I didn't think any of the 6 were projects, and I include Turnbull in that. I thought Turnbull was in to hit the ground running. We'd waited on him, he'd waited on us, and he was a first team player. But we've not seen enough of him. Are we utilising him enough? Are we looking at Turnbull as one for next season? Is the poor form that we're in going to change that plan and bring him into the fold?
Hopefully we're not looking at it as one for next season. Does that mean we're just writing off more or less a season of him? Him developing, he's come back from injury. He's proven it again at Motherwell. He's proven at SPL level. We buy him, and then as you say, we just don't see enough of him. Is it because the team's struggling? He wants him to put him into the team when the team's playing better. But is it easier to introduce somebody when the pressure's not going to be on him? When the team's playing a bit better, maybe. But definitely somebody we need to see more of. I'd have thought he was coming in as a first teamer, someone that, if he's not starting every week, he's getting minutes from the bench every week. I
hear a lot of people, and on the broadcast as well, commenting about the names that crop up often. Luca Connell and Sorrow. I'm sorry, but I don't agree. I don't think they're on the same kind of level as Turnbull in terms of first team opportunities. I don't think that they are that close to the first team.
Sorrow, I've liked what I've seen with him. We've not seen a lot, but he was definitely a project player when he came in. What's happening in training that would put him above it? Luca Connell, he's got first team experience with Bolton, but I don't think he's anywhere near.
He's not going to replace Laxalt or El Yunusi, is he?
No, I don't think he's anywhere near the first team. Turnbull or Sorrow are obviously, they're getting bench spaces, but you'd have thought Turnbull was going to be ahead of Sorrow in the pecking order, but who knows? What positions are we going to use them in? If we're going to use them, it's kind of hard one to see. We're bottom, but we're not playing them.
The thing again is you've got the scenario of us going into Easter Road. It's a stadium that Turnbull's familiar with. I mean that isn't like throwing him into a pressure-filled situation. There's going to be the pressure associated with any game that you play for Celtic, but it's not the unknown for somebody like Turnbull. So isn't the game against Hibs an opportunity to play someone like David Turnbull?
He definitely knows the league and he knows the teams he's playing against. As you say, there's a pressure with Celtic, but there's an added pressure when Celtic aren't playing well and are chasing in the league rather than being at the top of the league. So is Lenny, where does he see Turnbull playing? Does he see him as a replacement for one of the defensive mids? Does he see him as an attacking mid? Where generally does he see him fitting him into his team?
I think he would be viewed more offensively, higher up the pitch. There's a comment coming through. I'm going to get to it in just a moment from Red Scotland. But before I do that, from Facebook, Hibs, very hard game. Past 6 games, their only manager to win was Neil Lennon. That was in the Cup just after he took over. Brendan Rodgers couldn't win in 3 games at Easter Road, 2 defeats and a draw. Obviously, he found it hard to play against Neil Lennon because I remember Lenny getting a 2-2 draw at Celtic Park. That was the day of the Coolio gate that Tommy Sheridan speaks fondly of. But just jumping forward a wee bit, Red Scotland, make Ayer the holding midfielder with Duffy and Julian behind him. I've heard that being suggested quite a few times. I've also heard the same scenario, but with Beaton being that holding midfielder. There's this big kind of debate around Ayer because he originated further up the park. At one point he was in the midfield, he was an attacking midfielder, now he's playing centre half. I don't subscribe fully to the fact that we can revert him back to a midfielder. I think we've found his position, but I think the player that could benefit in there is Beaton. I think Beaton could be that holding midfielder, Lawrence.
His reading the game's really good. His ball retention's brilliant. He always finds a hook jersey. He more naturally drops back to be the third man. When the full-backs are pushed on, so you've got then 3 at the back. It's a bit of extra height, which is a team. We're not a tall team as a team. But it's perhaps why we lose a lot of goals from set pieces.
That's why we've brought in Duffy.
Well,
to be fair, the centre halves have got the height,
Yeah, so we've got 2 tall centre halves. 3 if you count Beaton, and we play 3 at the back, or we play him as a holding midfielder. I think we talked about it before. I think our team's just over 6 foot. Tom Rogic just over 6 foot. You get two small full backs. whether that's Diego, Taylor or Frimpong, McGregor and Brown.
You keep forgetting Ralston when you're talking about right backs.
Yeah, maybe it's a reflection on how close they be starting at right back is. I don't know, but he's only 5'10" or something. He's not tall, is he? Yeah. Then it's the same with Brown and McGregor. They're not particularly tall. Moyes 5'10". Griff isn't tall. I think 8. I'm not too sure. But French Eddie's maybe about 6 foot. I'm not too sure about it yet. So yeah, as a team, we're small. If you look back to the Martin O'Neill teams, they were giants compared to that, weren't they?
Yeah, they certainly did have the height. Some great points coming through. Michael Cavan, who is commenting on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, Michael. No international breaks now till next year, so all systems going for the seasons we push on now. I am of that mindset. I'm thinking this is the final kind of chance saloon to get it right now, and we need to really go hell for leather. I still look at the squad. Will we strengthen in January? I won't take that as a given. I think the kind of view was, let's get it done early. It wasn't early enough for Europe, of course, but let's get it done early. Let's get the business in. But it's just not worked out. And I don't think anyone's seen that coming when you looked at the 6 players we brought in.
Listen, between we strengthen in January, I suppose it's going to depend a lot on what happens between now and January, doesn't it? Where football as a whole sitting, COVID related, are fans going to be anywhere near back to the parks? Obviously there's talks of 2 vaccines now, which would suggest that probably would get people into grounds at least for next season. Where we're sitting in the league is going to depend whether or not we strengthen. How Barkas plays, again, if we sell anyone, sometimes, bids comes in and players want it away. A lot of time there's not a lot you can do as a club to stop that happening. So, as we sit just now, do we need to strengthen in January? Well, I don't think so. We just need to, we've definitely got the personnel to win the league. We just need to get them playing as a team. And we've got between now and I suppose the transfer window to prove that you can hopefully go on, and win every game, get us a 4th treble in a row, back to top of the league, and then your January. Are you really looking to strengthen then?
Well, we will wait and see. I mean, we've been hammered by injuries. Obviously, Julien's the next one to come in. I think after him, we'll probably be looking for Mikey Johnson to come back. Obviously, Frimpong, hopefully, will be back soon after the Motherwell shocker of a challenge. Forrest is out for, I think, another 7 weeks. So we've really been horrendously hit by injury. But the key for me, Lawrence, is the people coming in to replace these players, should be of a standard that should still be negotiating certainly the domestic game, but down to bad form of Duffy, the man who was meant to come in and shore everything up, and various others. Edward being the case in point. We've not been able to get that momentum going. I think it would be great. It would be great to see Neil Lennon with a full complement of players. And how he shapes that, because then there's no excuses. We can't blame it on illness. We can't blame it. And let's see if we can start to manufacture and engineer a run that we all know every game now after this international break is like a cup final, and we obviously have the cup final to look forward to in December. So between now and then, that would be your short term kind of focus.
Yep.
You're winning your games to get the momentum, and the players will want to be playing in the cup final ones.
Oh, definitely. 4th treble in a row. That's got to be, will let any club anywhere in the world ever match that if we do it. 4 domestic clean sweeps in a row. Doubt it. But you talk about the players coming in, but we really don't have anyone in a Jamesy Forrest's calibre to come in. You could say, we've got centre backs that could come in to replace Julian. Jamesy Forrest has been a huge miss for us. And his goals, his assists, the outball to him, he carries the ball well up the park. His experience as a winner. He's probably been the biggest miss, I would say, out the injuries.
He has been huge, and then you see obviously a lot of people who criticise Jamesy Forrest when he's playing, and they might realise just how big a player, how important he is. There's a few comments coming in relation to obviously McGregor and Christie, who have performed very well for Scotland, but it was something I was thinking about yesterday actually, because the game against Israel now is an important game for Scotland. Robert Arbuckle is saying that he hopes Calmack and Christie are only on the bench tomorrow. 3 games in a week is too much, especially with all the travelling. I would have expected Christie and McGregor to have sat out the last game and played against Israel. Do you think Clark is going to be doing Celtic any favours tomorrow night?
No, I think Stevie Clark's got a job and a duty to kind of look after Scotland as best as he can, and I think he's professional anywhere he's been. So I don't think he would ever keep an eye on. He's a big Celtic man, but I don't think he would leave them on the bench just to do Celtic a favour. He'll be doing what's best for him and his Scotland squad. Now, whether that's playing them or not,
well, he would need to play the pair of them then.
Well, he may see the game against Israel as I don't even know what it's format, to be honest. He may even see that as, well, it's a chance to try out something new. We might see Griff get, a full game. I don't know, but I don't think he'll be having an eye on doing any favours for Celtic, though. I think he'll be doing what's best for him and his Scotland squad.
Ryan Christie. Now, there's a player that I have championed as often as possible on this podcast. I get a bit of stick from Colin, actually, for that, because Colin can be critical of Ryan, as can a lot of Celtic fans. But I do think he is key to any success we have this season. He's obviously elevated his profile, after his performance against Serbia. And obviously, the interview afterwards probably added to that. That was his 15th cap. He won his 15th cap against Slovakia. 112 games for Celtic he's now played, 36 goals, 34 assists. So, he's been involved in 70 goals in 112 games. I think that shows you the impact, the creativity, the style and the type of player that he is. Interestingly for me, domestically, we've not lost a game this season with Ryan Christie and the team. Last season in all competitions we lost just 3. I know we don't lose many games. But I think it's key. I think Ryan Christie is key. And, I would hope selfishly that he's not playing tomorrow night, because I want Ryan Christie to be firing on all cylinders for Celtic against Hibs at the weekend.
You talked about culture change earlier. One of the things Lenny said when he comes in, he wants players to be taking shots earlier, taking more chances, rather than the Brendan ball of, we recycle the ball. Just
the
keep
horseshoe
the ball
continually,
Christie's a boy that seems to be following Lenny's instruction. He's getting the shots off earlier, he's playing the riskier passes. Is that part of the reason he's getting such good stats? He seems definitely bought into that culture change, shall we say. You want Ryan on the form he's on to play every game for Celtic, don't you?
You can't blame, and this is a big thing again, and it's something that I spoke to, just continually name dropping, but you speak to players that played alongside Lou Macari and Davy Hay for Celtic. Eventually Kenny Dalglish came into the same category. There is always that question: if you're doing well for Celtic, will you go down south? Now, we've seen it, as I just said there, we've seen it in the 70s, we've seen it in the 60s, we've seen it with Paddy Crerand. Before that, we've seen it with Bobby Collins and Billy Fernie. You go into the 1980s and it's Charlie Nicholas, it's Brian McClare, and it goes on and on. It's always been there. There's always been that. Even with some of the players that didn't come through our own ranks, the likes of Van Hooijdonk wanted a move to England, Di Canio wanted to go down there, Collins ended up down there via Monaco. It's always been there, and it's something we're always going to have to combat. But Ryan Christie must be looking at the likes of Tierney and Armstrong, who obviously he's friendly with, and he must be thinking, I want a bit of that.
Well, as a club, that's part of the thing with Celtic players. So if we're selling it to non-UK players, obviously the UK players here must be going, well, I would quite like that. Some cases, it'd be 4 or 5 times your money. Christie obviously had to come off of social media after the stick he got after that Livy game. So maybe he's not, fully enjoying it. Maybe he just does genuinely fancy playing in the EPL. If he does, he's 18 months or so left in his contract. If he doesn't sign a new contract, we know that the board are kind of fiscally prudent and would probably be looking to move him on in the summer then. Even if he signs a new contract, he may still move on. It's no guarantee he's going to stay here long term. So maybe that's where Ryan does see his future. He's seeing Stuart Armstrong now doing well with high-flying Southampton, Tierney turning it on with Arsenal, and maybe he's thinking, I could do that. He's maybe also looking at
you're mingling
John
with
McGinn.
Armstrong, you're mingling with McGinn, you're right. And you're playing alongside players who are down south on vastly higher wages than you that aren't a patch on you. I'm not going to name them. I'm not going to be critical of them. But there are players in that Scotland squad, Lawrence, playing down south that, you know, they couldn't lace Ryan Christie's boots.
Yeah, and they'll definitely be in a lot more than them. I think Charlie Christie talked about he was watching a game with Ryan at Celtic Park, and it was a Barcelona game. I was saying to Ryan, that's the standard you need to aim for. And maybe that's what Ryan's got in mind, the standard he wants to get to, and he sees part of that as moving on from Celtic. I don't know, but you know, it wouldn't be a surprise if it was. You know, he's not signed his new contract. It's been there for a while. What negotiations are going on? We're not going to be able to offer as much money even as. I mean, I thought even the Championship now. I think that's kind of where it's got to, isn't it?
Well, it has. I mean, you even look at some of the signing targets that we are interested in. You can see it just in the last window. Ivan Toney, you know, and you look at what you're up against if you're trying to put a package together for a player like that. You look at the players we bring in from the English game. Duffy out of favour at Brighton, El Yunusi out of favour at Southampton, Ayeti out of favour at West Ham. That's the type of player we get. We don't get the up and coming players because there's a host of English clubs who can completely trounce us when it comes to wages that'll get in there first.
I mean, you know, gone a day when you were signing Stubbs and there was other clubs down south.
That was a revelation, that signing.
Even when you get back to, I suppose, Neil, when you were getting like Lenny, Tomo, Sutton, you know, we were paying comparable wages at that time.
Yep.
Those days, you know,
they'll never return
at the moment.
They'll never return.
Well,
Welsh were in the Scotland game. They'll never return.
Yeah, Welsh won the Scotland game. So maybe the development with us saying no to the Atlantic League and Desmond saying no, status quo British League, maybe they're closer, because I would have thought it'd be just reading into it. You know, for us to say no to the Atlantic League when they've got,
I thought it was a more possible destination,
and they've got billions of pounds apparently worth of commitments to it if it goes ahead, you know, which will be from sponsorship, TV companies, whatever. Does Desmond know that there's something happening with a British league? Does he think that's now more likely? The
big thing that will decide that, Lawrence, is you look at the situation financially in English football. There's 25 clubs apparently staring down the barrel of a gun that might not see out the season. 25 clubs. Now, when you're looking at that, that's a huge amount of clubs that the whole everything's just going to disappear, because in England that's what happens. Now, in Scotland, you're going to have clubs that, you know, if there is going to have to be a stabilisation period where they need clubs that are still in business to make up what they see as their top division, top two divisions, then it might be back on the table. People think you're barmy if you talk like that, but going back to the interview we did on this podcast a couple of months back, where it gets to the point where what you now know is the reality won't be the reality after COVID when it comes to football. So the goalposts will be moved. And perhaps, you know, that development, you know, I don't think you're looking too much into it, because if there was a possibility of the Transatlantic League working and helping Celtic to manoeuvre their way out of Scottish football, we'd be all over it. Yeah. And so, as I touched on, politically, it's kind of would be good for the UK government if that happened, wouldn't it? You know, if there was a British league, if they'd done away with it. They might use it as a political angle as well, Lawrence. You know that they would take advantage of that, I'm pretty sure. Now, Philip DeMarco's made a great point. Afternoon, lads. Afternoon to you as well, Philip. The chat the last few episodes on and off the camera has been top notch. I think that's because there's a wee delay in us going live, so we could be tuning the fat for a couple of minutes and we don't even know it. But hey, that just adds to it. It just adds to it. And from Facebook, why did Griffiths only play 22 minutes in 2 games for Scotland? Now, I'm going to say it's down to his fitness. Well, it's 2 squads and it's the same thing. He's not getting full time. So who's ahead of him in Scotland? Lyndon Dykes and Burnley. At the moment, yes. Yeah, but again, that's Stevie Clark's decision. But that would appear to be the case. Dykes is scoring goals. I suppose if a striker's scoring goals, how do you keep him out of the team? Dykes has been a real find. He's been a real find. Now, what I find interesting, I'm not saying I regret us not going for him and all this and that. There's certain players that you would never have thanked Celtic for buying, and he's one of them. But then you watch him playing for Scotland, you think, Stevie Clark's playing him exactly how he needs to play him, and he's getting a good tune out of him. He's playing a system that suits the players, doesn't he? Yeah. That suits him. But then again, Lee Griffiths can lead the line as a sole striker. I mean, he's a 40-goal in Scotland as a sole striker. Mm-hmm. Is it fitness? If it is, you know, for November, and
the player would have to take a big chunk of that responsibility if it's fitness. Sutton slagged him, the state of him. I'm looking at a picture of him thinking, didn't look overweight to me, but what do I know? Don't have a BMI reading or VO2 max or know anything about. You see him on the park. He doesn't look particularly unfit or overweight. There's other players in Scotland that you can tell are carrying a few extra pounds, but I don't see that with Griff. Is it fitness? Is it, obviously that's kind of physical fitness. Is there another fitness issue to it? I don't know, mate. But maybe Clark's just got Dykes is scoring goals. I want to give him a run. I know what I get with Griff. Why? So McBurney's in front of him. It's anyone's guess.
Do you think it would benefit Lee Griffiths maybe by getting 60, 75 minutes tomorrow night for Scotland? At this stage, I'm thinking, how does this benefit Celtic? Maybe I'm completely off track here, but I would have thought that match fitness comes from playing matches.
Well, if you could play 90 minutes, that would probably put to bed the fact that he can't play 90 minutes because he's not fit enough. If he puts in a good shift for 90 minutes, does well, you'd be going, well, he's obviously fit enough to play 90 minutes. And I suppose everybody's guessing, going, Lee Griffiths scores goals when he plays, but he doesn't play often enough, and he's only coming off the bench. What exactly is wrong? And that's happening for Scotland and for Celtic. Well, Scotland, we've touched on, Dykes is playing well. Maybe Clark just thinks he suits his system better. That's it. With Celtic, you're looking going, geez, but
I always knew Dykes was a player. We always knew that he was a player. It comes from good stock.
You used to think
it comes from good stocks. David Bradley is commenting on YouTube. Spot on, Paul. Christie could get 70 grand a week down south. Now, this does beg the question: who was the last Celtic player who didn't fly the nest, who didn't look for the bigger wage, who didn't do that? Who was the last Celtic? Was it Paul McStay?
Jamesy Forrest hasn't.
Forrest.
Carl Mack hasn't.
Yet.
I don't think
Forrest will.
Both of them are yets.
Question mark over Callum McGregor.
Both of those are yets, but they've given us some serious service, haven't they?
Oh, no.
It's not like they've come in, they've had a couple of good seasons, right, I'm off. If either of those players was to leave now, I think they would be a different category because they're leaving quite a bit late in their career when they've given a lot of service.
You look at sometimes I hark back, but sometimes there's learning and harking back, right? So you look back at the greatest side Celtic have ever had, and some of those players, Lawrence, were very close to moving down to the English game before Jock Stein came in. So Billy McNeil had a transfer lined up. Yep. He was going to go to London. You had Jimmy Johnston, who was, attracting interest from Tottenham Hotspur. So these players were genuinely considering leaving Celtic for the move down to England until Jock Stein came in.
Well, there was no success at that time. Was there? 65 when he came in was the Scottish Cup one, and they started to turn around. Paddy Creran was obviously, he was related to Charlie Gallagher and Mullaney, wasn't he? So a lot of the players were known from the Glasgow football scene to each other. So it wouldn't have been unusual for them.
There's always been that allure of the English game.
It's success, it's money. Celtic have never particularly been known as great players. I think when they tried to sell McGrory to Arsenal, when McGrory refused to go, they come back and cut McGrory's wage, and he was the worst player paid member of the Celtic's first team because he wouldn't move on. So I think a lot of that just goes with the way the families used to manage Celtic in those days, wasn't it? Only 20,000 in a game today, you couldn't move in Celtic Park, and you're like, 20,000, wait a minute, where would you put the other 50 odd if they turned up?
I know. I mean, see, when you're thinking though, I had a very, very interesting discussion about this yesterday, simply because Neil Lennon brought up the question of culture. I think we've both been involved in businesses who have had to implement cultural change specialists to come in, and I think that's why when I heard that comment, it really, really surprised me, because you know what that actually entails to change a culture. It's not as though you turn up one day and say, right guys, we need to change the culture of the club, and then it happens. But I was talking yesterday to a very experienced Scottish journalist who's been in the game 40 years, and I says to him, that I think Tierney did have the Paul McStay mindset. I actually do believe that he did have the Paul McStay mindset, and he wanted to be at Celtic for 10 in a row, and he wanted to be the most decorated Celtic player and play more games than anyone else. I honestly believe that, until Brendan Rodgers came in and changed the mindset of Kieran Tierney. And I think he also changed the mindset of Callum McGregor and potentially of Ryan Christie.
Well, Roy just talks about that, talking to players about, you know, you've got to make the best for yourself, you've got to challenge yourself. So I think it's without doubt he's certainly put those ideas into their heads if they weren't already there. You know, that you should actually be going, you should be doing better than this. You know, we got a lot of money for Kieran. Are we always going to sell? You know, just now that the financial disparity is such that you're looking at another Charlie Nicholas situation where he was going down and get 5-6 times his wages. That's what we're talking about again, isn't it? That's how big a disparity it is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, but the players want to move on. There's a lot of pressure comes with playing with Celtic. You're expected to win every game, because I think, you know, I was reading an Arsenal fanzine or online article, they were talking about the players' reaction to Tierney in training, how he wanted to win all the time. And the Arsenal players were like, well, wait a minute, what's going on? Because they didn't have that expectation level on them. And it was, so that mindset that kind of Kieran brought down there has definitely benefited them. So maybe it's stepping out of the pressure. There's Stuart Armstrong, he's now doing well with Southampton. You know, he's on a lot more wages. He certainly won't be feeling the kind of pressure that he was getting playing for Celtic. So it could be a combination of factors. Some people just, but you know, money's got to play a huge part, hasn't it? If you're, you know, what Celtic's top wage is going to be, 25,000 just now. Can we offer that on a new contract with the way COVID's sitting?
I think it becomes a frustration for players who are on, let's even say, the average wage at Celtic, maybe not even the top earners, and then we bring someone in like Shane Duffy who is on big wages.
Yep.
And then you're maybe looking at him and saying, what are you contributing compared to what I'm putting into this? Because you look at it, Christie, there's 70 goals and under 120 games he's been involved in, either as the creator or as the goal scorer. I mean, that's a phenomenal contribution to Celtic's success. He's scored winning goals in League Cup finals. I mean, and the thing with Christie is there's this instant reaction if someone refuses to sign a contract. All of a sudden he's selfish. All of a sudden he shouldn't be taking that shot. He shouldn't. And you think, well, actually he should be taking the shot. The one thing I would change about Christie's game, I would take him off the corners and the free kicks. 100%.
There's a reaction of players don't sign a contract, but you know, it cuts both ways. Celtic don't offer everyone on their books new contracts. You know, there's unfortunately Daniel Church just set up with Dumbarton, isn't it? 12, 13 years at the club.
Yep. Never
get a game. And he's off out. So I suppose players to an extent do need to look after themselves, don't they? You know, and if they feel they're being unfairly treated, or whether they just look down south and just say that's just mind-blowing money down there, or they think it's going to be a better test for them, you know,
or they get
professionally.
They get touched by the Brendan Rodgers kind of mindset of look after yourself. You know, there's bigger things in the world out there, because obviously we all know how mercenary someone like Rodgers is. It's brand Brendan. It's not about Celtic. It's not about Leicester. You know, everybody knows if someone else was to give him a wee wink elsewhere and it was a bigger job than Leicester, he'd be gone. The suit would already be pressed and it would be the club crest on it. He'd be away.
Imagine it would say,
he thinks
Gunner goes
exactly. He thinks his destination's Real Madrid. That in Brendan Rodgers' mind, that's where he sees himself. So Celtic were a stepping stone. Leicester are a stepping stone. Man United, you're absolutely right. He'll be looking at the odds for managers losing their jobs, and he'll be right in there.
He'll be wanting to run FIFA. I don't think he would stop at Real Madrid. You know, it's just, he just. But maybe that's what, you know, what's bred the success in him, is having that kind of, you know, that's part of his makeup, isn't it? Everyone's different. Maybe that's kind of, you know, if that's what drives him and makes him so successful. Certainly the first 18 months under him.
Domestically.
Good. Yeah.
Domestically,
yep.
Absolutely.
You know, the rest, you know, it wasn't as good as the first 18 months, but maybe it comes down to what Strachan was saying. You know, managers have got a shelf life, and it's, you know, with a big club and it's kind of 3 years. Maybe there's some truth in that. You know, teams get used to playing against you and what kind of tactics you like, and perhaps you become stale.
Possibly. Now, it's never stale when you're around, Lawrence, and thanks again for coming in on a Tuesday to join us on a Celtic State of Mind's Bulletin. Thank you everybody for commenting on the social media channels, Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. Please subscribe to YouTube. We're pushing it up with a target of 5,000 by the end of the year. We've got a few prizes which we'll talk tomorrow about. Simon Donnelly will be joining us on the ACSOM Bulletin tomorrow at 12:30. So I look forward to catching up with Sid. We'll be talking about what he's been up to during the lockdown as well. But all that's left for me to say is thank you once again, Lawrence Conley, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thanks, Paul. Keep faith.